This is a special episode of CRM Audio, the Dynamics 365 podcast, with Ken Lorenz from Riva, where we're going to be talking about extending the Dynamics 365 Exchange synchronization using Riva. This episode is brought to you by CRMUG. CRMUG is the user group for Dynamics 365 and CRM, powered by users for users, and specializes in the delivery of member-driven education, networking, and events to help you maximize your current Microsoft Dynamics investment. We thank CRMUG, the Dynamics 365 user group, for sponsoring CRM Audio.
Hi, this is Joel Lindstrom, and one of the things that we talk about a lot is activity management and synchronization for Outlook and Exchange. I talk to people who use Dynamics as what do they really need to sync and how they need to do it, and a lot of people fit in what's out of the box, but sometimes you reach scenarios that go beyond the out-of-the-box capabilities. And so my go-to partner for that is Riva. And if you haven't heard of Riva, they've been in the business a long time, and they focus on things like extending the Exchange synchronization inside of Dynamics as well as other platforms. And we're joined by Ken Lorenz from Riva. And Ken, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Joel. Good to be here.
And so I guess to start with, who is Riva?
You know, that's a great question, Joel. So we've been around for about 10 years as Riva. We got into this business by virtue of the fact that a long time ago, another smaller software company, we were using CRM and we were using email, and we were frustrated by the lack of integration between the two. And so we decided that we could come up with a better solution. So we built a server-side or cloud-based sync solution that really connects the mail at the server level as well as the CRM via the native APIs. And we did such a good job with it, we decided to take it commercial.
So you were server-side sync before Microsoft had a server-side sync.
I'd like to think that we coined the term server-side sync, but I can't say that we did or didn't.
Right, because I remember the days back then were painful because that was when people started getting iPhones and not always sitting in front of their Windows computer. More people started using Macs, as I see you do, and the options were just non-existent. It was a pretty good story if you were in the Microsoft and Windows and Internet Explorer and Outlook world, but you step outside of that and it was a desert.
Oh, absolutely. And as a salesperson and as a sales leader, there's nothing more frustrating than asking your team to make sure that their activities are up to date in CRM so everybody can see what's going on in the organization, and you have technology that's either clumsy or doesn't get the job done or doesn't work every time. And so what happens is people stop using it, and then none of the benefits. So if it only syncs some of the time, it doesn't sync any of the time because people stop using it.
Right, and it's just a fact. You go into a company that has an older version of CRM that had the idea we want to be Outlook only and have people do everything in Outlook. It was a good idea when they did it, but then you'll come back 5 years later, you find out that half the people have uninstalled the plugin or aren't running, or they upgraded their computer and didn't upgrade the plugin. So fortunately, Microsoft has fixed a lot of that with the Outlook app and the newer integrations like server-side sync. It's a much better world. But what are some of the key reasons that people that extend Dynamics extend it with Riva?
Sure. So I think I'd put that into a couple different categories, Joel.
Okay.
And you and I have talked about this in the past quite a bit, and I think you've identified some things we didn't even realize were there. But and so thank you for that. One category that I would put that into is I think in a perfect world as a customer, you're running D365, you're running Office 365, most modern versions on both sides. And so you get to take advantage of all that latest technology that's there that Microsoft has put together. Reality is sometimes maybe you're current on CRM, but you're still stuck on an older version of Exchange 2010, or maybe it's hosted. The way we've architected our technology, we're backward compatible back to those older versions. Mm-hmm. And so for companies that haven't quite made that leap yet, we're able to at least bridge that gap until they do.
Okay.
So there's a lot of things that go there. I think, The other place that starts to come into play is you've got customers that are using Dynamics 365 for CRM, but for whatever reason they're sitting on a non-Microsoft Mail platform like Gmail or Lotus Notes. And believe it or not, Lotus Notes is still out there, alive and kicking. Obviously, G Suite is coming on the scene pretty strong too.
Yeah.
And so we're able to bridge that for customers too, so they get the same level of benefit that they would if they were running with a Microsoft Mail platform.
Yeah, and sometimes people have other CRM systems too.
That's exactly
You got
right.
large enterprise customers that have a group that uses Dynamics, another group that uses Salesforce, and we're trying to get everybody in the world to use Dynamics. But the reality is, there's other platforms that have a lot of people. I see a lot of people still using Sales Logics or other platforms like that. And so, what I love about Riva is you can give the consistent experience to everybody, especially the people, salespeople, and other people living out of Outlook or living out of email. The other one, and I think this has been the biggest one for us, has been delegate tracking. And Microsoft has had kind of a mixed story on delegate tracking. Originally, they had it with the client-side plugin, but then in the move to server-side, the server-side integration has not supported the delegate tracking. I should caveat to say that they just recently, and this is kind of breaking news, they have introduced category-based tracking, which gives you, at least on appointments, the ability for an assistant to set a category and have that track. Kind of similar to what Riva does. They also have folder-based tracking, where you can put a mail folder and have that folder associated with a certain account or opportunity. However, it doesn't go as far as what Riva does. And so for people that the delegate functionality or delegate tracking is super important to, investment banks, private equity, professional services, that's where you frequently will hit a wall with what's out of the box. And then that's where Riva can come in and can extend that to, for example, your folder tracking, if I understand it right, will automatically give you like all the opportunities you want without you having to go manually link them. It doesn't have a 25 record limit like Dynamics does.
That's right. I mean, there are some limitations there. I mean, just in terms of how many folders do you really want to show.
Right.
But the way that we do it, and we've got some different options in the way we can configure it for a given instance. But the most common thing that we see is we reorder the folders based on how recently the opportunities have been touched in CRM. Mm-hmm. So we're assuming that if you're touching the opportunity, that's probably an opportunity you want to sync mail items with and contacts and so on.
Right.
So a little smart way of doing it. We try to make it as easy as we can for people.
Right. And another reason is extending the tracking and experience, because Microsoft gives you the ability to say, I don't want to sync to this field, but they don't let you say, I want to add a new field to sync the contact name to, not the regular one. And so you have kind of unlimited flexibility to change that sync experience. If you've ever had a user or a sales manager say, I really wish instead of syncing to this field, we could sync over here. Unfortunately, it's limited out of the box, but Riva can allow us to customize that experience.
Right, and we were probably the first ones that put that into our product, that not only are we synchronizing and aligning emails and calendar items with objects in CRM, common objects like opportunities and quotes and tasks and so on, but also custom objects and custom modules that are built within the framework too.
Okay.
The other thing that we do, Joel, around extending that tracking experience, and I love this story. Sometimes you hear stories from the field and they just resonate.
Right.
We had a mortgage company recently come to us, and they had a business problem that they had sometimes customers that did silly things, like putting their social security number or credit card numbers or driver's license numbers in email.
That never happens.
No, never happens. And certainly bad enough that it got into email, but the last thing you want to do is accidentally sync that into CRM.
Right.
And so one of the things that we had built in our product years ago was a pattern matching capability. We initially used it to look for case numbers or ticket numbers in a customer service context. Well, we were able to use that pattern matching for this customer, find those patterns, i.e. social security numbers, etc., and then we actually were able to give that customer the choice. Would you like to redact that information and sync the rest of the email, or just choose not to sync the email at all? And so give them a really good business solution and great options on how they wanted to move that over.
Okay, so what if you have a mixed bag and you have, say, executives that have assistants that need the enhanced delegate tracking, but then you've got salespeople that don't have assistants and the normal sync experience and tracking experience works fine. Do you have to have everybody on Riva? Do you have to license for everybody, or can you pick and choose and have certain groups use Riva and certain groups use the out-of-the-box capabilities?
No, great question, Joel. So we're incredibly flexible from a licensing model as well as from a configuration standpoint. So on the licensing side of things, we don't have to match up one for one with Dynamics licenses. So if you've got let's say you just want to solve the delegate tracking problem for your executive assistants, we can just put Riva in for them. Everybody else in the company uses server-side sync. That works just fine. The other thing you can consider doing is you might use server-side sync for certain things and maybe use Riva for other things. So maybe only use Riva for calendar sync, but let server-side sync do contacts and emails.
And I think we had a financial services company just use it for contacts.
Yep.
Because they didn't like the way the contact rules worked, and they had more advanced logic for contacts, and so they disabled the server-side sync option for contacts, or disabled the rule, and then use Riva for the contacts. So that's great. So a lot of people just think Riva is synonymous with sync and tracking, which is true, but you guys do a lot more than that. So what are some of the other functionalities that you can, or some of the other value you can bring to Dynamics customers?
Sure. So we like I said, we started life thinking about synchronizing email to CRM, and we thought about that in the context of where do people spend most of their time, and I think unless you're a call center agent sitting in front of three screens all day long, all three have CRM up, you probably live in email, right? And that's it's the first application that I open. Well, actually, that's not true. That application never closes. But it's the first thing I look at every morning. It's the last thing I look at when I shut down. So one of the things we wanted to do was provide one click to relevance for somebody sitting in their email. Now, that's true if they're sitting in Outlook. Maybe they're sitting on their phone looking at their email. And what we wanted them to be able to do is in the context of whatever they were doing, maybe reading an email, preparing for a meeting. So I'm looking at a meeting request in my calendar. With one click, I want to be able to see information that is surfaced from other sources of data to help me prepare for the meeting, give it the right context, etc. So we've got a product we call Riva Insight. In the Microsoft context, it's a mail.app in an Outlook 2016 environment. So super lightweight, can be pushed out by administrators. The end user doesn't have to install it, don't have to go out there and touch the laptops. And the concept is, if I'm sitting on an email or sitting on a calendar item, I immediately get a sidebar that updates dynamically with the contacts that are in the email or the contacts that are on the meeting request. And I can start to see information about what we know about that particular contact from CRM, as an example. What meetings have we had? What meetings are coming up? But not just meetings that I've had, meetings that other people in the organization have had as well. And then we also start to then link out to other data sources, some of them free, like simple things like go to Google Maps, right? Or Google News or Wikipedia. And while those seem maybe trivial to a certain degree, if you're on the telephone and you don't have to ask the question, hey, how's the weather in Greenville today? You could say, gosh, Joel, it looks like a beautiful day in Greenville, right? And right. Just simple icebreakers like that. But then we actually take it a step further. So we start to embed things like Insight View and products like TrustSphere, which is a relationship analytics solution, and other AI components. So again, we're trying to be a customer intelligence platform, if I can coin that term, where applications are able to be embedded into that platform, giving a customer one click to relevance.
So that's the insight part of Riva, right?
Correct.
Which is the sidebar. And so the scenario, this parallels kind of where Microsoft is going and has gone with things like Insight View and Relationship Insights, which are people use inside of Dynamics. When you're inside of Outlook, you click that, you see some inside the app for Outlook, but it doesn't necessarily expose the Insight View content to you. Where this can do that. So there again, you're not replacing Dynamics, you're extending it and extending experience and feeding Dynamics data to you within Outlook.
That's correct. That's exactly right.
Now, what's the mobile story there? Does that work in the Outlook app on the phone?
As a matter of fact, it does. So
okay.
We were at a show 2 weeks ago, and somebody asked me that question, and I grabbed my phone and I went into Outlook and I looked up their contact record, and sure enough, there was the Riva Insight button right on the Outlook ellipsis. Launched it and immediately was getting information. So it's the same experience you get whether you're in Outlook on your laptop or on your tablet or your phone.
And one thing I know that is big for industries that are very, very relationships are extra important, financial services, etc., is the who knows who, and that can also make those connections. So who else in my organization knows somebody else?
Exactly, and we're seeing software companies pushing really hard on that topic. So I mentioned TrustSphere as an example, and there are others, IntroHive and others that are doing the same type of thing, where they're really trying to look at the strength of relationships based on how often people email each other and how quickly they respond to each other. And I think that context makes a lot of sense above and beyond, say, just using LinkedIn as an example. I don't know about you. I've got probably 2,500 contacts in LinkedIn. You're probably well above that, is my guess. But my guess is, if you were to ask me about people within my LinkedIn connections, if I know them really well, the answer is probably going to be, no, I don't remember who that is. What the relationship analytics does is it does zero in on relationships that are active. And that becomes very useful in things like...
How is it defining an active relationship? Is it I'm emailing them, or
Correct.
Somebody else in the organization has emailed? Is that just based on the emails inside Dynamics? Does that see what's in my inbox I might not have tracked?
It's looking at the emails that are going back and forth between your company and the target company that we're looking at.
Okay.
And who within our organization is connecting with who within that target organization, and how frequently they're emailing each other, how quickly they respond, right? So if you and I don't have a very good relationship, you might email me and I might respond 5 days later. If we've got a good relationship and you email me, I'm probably going to respond to you very quickly. Mm-hmm. And that's just another way of measuring the strength of that relationship.
Now, one question that comes up when we talk about third-party add-ons for things like Sync, similar to Riva, is security. So with the tracking and synchronization engine being a cloud-based, how do you answer the security question? Are you storing any data in your cloud for contact information? GDPR is a big concern this month, since that kicks in Europe for people who do business in Europe. So how do you handle that? Are you storing any data in the Riva cloud? Where is that stored?
Sure, great question. So a couple of pieces to that question. So one is, we don't store any data. So when we're synchronizing information, we are encrypting data in transit,
okay,
but we don't store anything.
Okay.
And there's no reason for us to store it. Now what we do log are pointers to where the record is, right? So if I have a contact in CRM, I know where that contact is. I know the value of that contact, so that I can go find it again in the future and keep it in sync with each other. But I'm not storing that contact's information within our system. So that's part one. Part two of that security question is, we're actually deployment agnostic. So if you want to put our sync service on-premise, truly on-premise in your four walls, great. Maybe you've got a data center of your choice you prefer to use, that's great too. If you like, you can consume it as a cloud service, and we do it as either a multi-tenant cloud or as a dedicated instance as well.
That's sometimes a concern when we deal with government type entities or government contractors, people in the Microsoft government cloud. There's still a concern about anything being outside of there. So for those people, you have the option to deploy it to their own on-premises, or can they put it in a private cloud in their own, be it Azure or AWS?
Yep, no, that's exactly right. In fact, while our product is not built for any particular industries, we've done very well in financial services, exactly for that reason. Huge security requirements around data. And so if I were to look at the majority of our financial services customers, they actually use our sync service on-premise.
Okay.
Some of them are starting to migrate to dedicated cloud, it'll probably be some time before they would ever consider a multi-tenant cloud. But the most secure, most difficult security requirements that we meet, we end up typically being on premise.
Okay. Are there any, put it this way, is the performance impacted if you have, say, Exchange and Dynamics online and you have Riva on premises?
No, we really don't see the performance issue because we're typically going directly through the API calls.
Okay.
And so one of the common things that we run into is maybe a customer wants to use our sync service in the cloud. They've got their Dynamics sitting in the cloud, but they've got their Exchange behind the firewall. Mm-hmm. So we'll do IP tunneling to be able to access that server, as an example. So we really haven't seen the performance issues, and we've got customers that have north of 20,000 users in a single organization synchronizing calendars and emails on our daily basis.
Okay, great. Well, Ken, I appreciate you stopping by and filling us in on this. This is great. Again, my recommendation to everybody is if you do find that you fall into the category of pushing the limits of what the out-of-the-box can do for as far as server-side sync, or if you're happy with the sync and you just want to give your users inside of Outlook more insight into who they're talking to, who they're meeting with, who else they know, get a warm connection to somebody rather than doing a cold email blast to them, I recommend you check out Riva. What's your website, Ken?
Everybody's got to have a simple website, right? So it's Riva CRM integration singular.com.
Okay. All right, great. Well, thanks for stopping by, Ken.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate your time, Joel.
All right. This has been CRM Audio, the Dynamics 365 podcast. Send us your feedback at voice@crm.audio. Check out our other shows at crm.audio or subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and any place else podcasts are offered. This podcast is a production of Dynamics Podcast, LLC.